Coming up next, the nation bids farewell to President Ronald Reagan. Presidential historian Robert Dallek will join me, along with Wolf Blitzer and Judy Woodruff. Stay with us.
Former First Lady Nancy Reagan, a classic interview encore. Larry King, CNN 9 Eastern.
A political defense of President Bush coming from an unlikely source. Russian President Vladimir Putin. Putin defended President Bush against criticism from Democrats over the war in Iraq. Putin, answering reporters' questions at the G8 summit in Sea Island, Georgia, said Democrats have, quote, no moral right to attack the president over Iraq, end quote. President Putin reminded reporters it was President Clinton who authorized the 1999 bombing of Yugoslavia by U.S. and NATO forces. Russia opposed both the Yugoslav bombing and, of course, the war in Iraq. Returning now to our top story, the nation's final farewell to President Ronald Reagan. Joining me now from Washington, CNN's Wolf Blitzer and Judy Woodruff, who've been leading our coverage. And in Washington, presidential historian Robert Dallek, the author of numerous books on presidents, including Ronald Reagan, The Politics of Symbolism. Bob, before I bring in my colleagues who've done just such an outstanding job this week, let me ask you this, the essential question at the end of this week of mourning, this National Day of Mourning. Is it, in your judgment, and I know it's early, but is it, in your judgment, too soon to say that Ronald Reagan will go down as one of the most important presidents?
Well, Lou, I think there's no question he'll be remembered as one of the most significant presidents in the country's history, and particularly in the 20th century. You know, Lou, there have only been 12 presidents out of the 43 so far who had 8 years or more in office. The more, of course, was FDR. And that's pretty thin group, or a pretty limited group to be part of, and so that alone makes him a major, significant president. And I think historians will be looking at his records and studying his work and his administration, his leadership, for years and years to come. You know, we're only 15 years away from his presidency, and the bulk of his papers have not opened yet. And so historians in the next 15, 20 years are really going to dig in, and biographers and historians are going to have a field day, so to speak. And I think we're going to see an awful lot of books about Ronald Reagan's 8 years in the presidency in the next 15, 20 years.
Judy, I would ask both you and Wolf, as you have been reporting on this week of mourning for our 40th president, to think back in your coverage of presidents, remember and recall your coverage of this President Ronald Reagan, and give us your best sense. They say that news is history's first draft. No offense, Robert Dallek. But in the first draft, your thoughts, your reactions, your personal thoughts. Judy?
Well, it has just been an extraordinary week. I mean, it has been, and this has been...
Years in the presidency in the next 15, 20 years.
Judy, I would ask both you and Wolf, as you have been reporting on this week of mourning for our 40th president, to think back in your coverage of presidents, remember and recall your coverage of this President Ronald Reagan, and give us your best sense. They say that news is history's first draft. No offense, Robert Dallek. But in the first draft, your thoughts, your reactions, your personal thoughts. Judy?
Well, it has just been an extraordinary week. I mean, it has been, and this has been said over and over again, it's the first time in 30 years that we have had a state funeral for a president, where we've seen the sort of pomp and circumstance that we've had all week. You know, you've had both the majesty of today's service at the National Cathedral here in Washington and the very emotional, if you will, the scene of the caisson coming down Pennsylvania, or rather Constitution Avenue on Wednesday, combined with the very personal scenes with Nancy Reagan. So it's brought together the state, the pomp, but it's also brought the personal, all in one in a 6-day period. And I think it's also been a time to bring Americans together. If only for a few days, it's brought us together.
And one point I'd add, Lou, is that as much as these are icons and these are famous people, Ronald Reagan, of course, the President of the United States, what we saw also are that these are human beings who are left in the aftermath. Nancy Reagan, a wife who so deeply loved her husband, now in mourning. And the children, of course, in mourning as well. And others are human beings, like the former president, the first president, Bush, when he choked up today as he was delivering that eulogy, and he became so sentimental about the man he served for 8 years as vice president, that was just a human moment that all of us could appreciate.
And Bob Dallek, that's really part of the motivation for this pomp and circumstance, as Judy referred to it, as the nation remembers a president now going to his final resting place in California. The nation attaches to the symbolism that you've spoken of in all of this.
Yes. Well, you know, Reagan is a powerful symbolic figure, most of all because, as Judy was saying, he's a unifying force. And I think I've been saying there's been so much acrimony in our politics in recent years. You remember back to the election of 2000 and now the current election campaign. It's so divisive. And Reagan sort of inspirits the nation, gives it a feeling that it has shared values and a better future.
A reminder that we can be united, and we appreciate all of you being here. Again, Judy Woodruff, Wolf Blitzer, just outstanding work this week. We thank you very much. And Robert Dallek, we thank you very much for your time and sharing your thoughts. Turning now to the results of our poll, only 4% of you responded that you have not decided whom you will vote for in this presidential election. And the undecided is narrowing significantly, at least among this audience, this very demanding and intelligent audience of this broadcast. We thank you for voting. Still ahead, paying tribute to a friend, the special relationship between President Reagan and former President Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, and celebrating two men with the words and music both love.
Here's what we're working on tonight for Newsnight. What the nearly 10,000 letters that Ronald Reagan wrote reveal on a special edition of Newsnight, CNN, 10:30 p.m. Eastern.
President Reagan had a special relationship, both political and personal, with former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. The 78-year-old Lady Thatcher, in poor health after her stroke and against her doctor's wishes, flew from London to pay tribute and respects to her friend and compatriot in world leadership. Robin Oakley reports from London.
Margaret Thatcher greeted the death of President Ronald Reagan by declaring he was one of her closest political allies and dearest personal friends. He was the only world leader she used to kiss, and theirs was likely the most long-lasting and effective world leaders alliance of the 1980s. The great communicator in the White House, and the woman dubbed the Iron Lady by a Soviet Army newspaper, saw the world in stark black and white, not in any intervening shade of grey.
And really their thinking on many issues, not just the evils of communism, became very similar. Hatred of high taxes, hatred of big government, hatred of socialism in all its forms.
The so-called special relationship was probably stronger with Thatcher in Downing Street and Reagan in the White House than it's been since the days of Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill.
It is how much we have in common and the depth of our friendship that truly matters.
In her memoirs, which have 72 references to President Reagan in the index, she notes, "I knew that I was talking to someone who instinctively thought and felt as I did." And they didn't always agree. It was Thatcher who first persuaded Reagan that the Soviet Union's Mikhail Gorbachev was a man they could do business with. But when the two presidents met at Reykjavik and President Reagan nearly agreed to surrender most of the West's arsenal of arms, she dashed off to Washington to lecture him on his imprudence. And observers say she was furious when in 1983 the US invaded the Caribbean state of Grenada, a member of the British Commonwealth, without first warning the UK. Thatcher's increasing suspicion of Europe increased her eagerness to work with President Reagan.
I prefer the great alliance between the English-speaking peoples in America. It's that which saved liberty for the world.
It was an alliance which worked for two leaders successfully seeking to rebuild optimism in their countries. Margaret Thatcher was always ready to pay tribute to America and to the leadership of a president she saw as having played a major part in the defeat of communism.
You have in this century so often remained steadfast for what is right, and against what is wrong.
And it was the way in which the special relationship worked in their time, perhaps, which in the end brought round a Europe initially suspicious of a president who worked as a Hollywood actor to appreciate his contribution to history. Robin Oakley, CNN, London.
This has been a week in which the nation's focus has been on remembrance of one of the greatest presidents of the past 100 years, Ronald Reagan. But we also lost another national treasure this week, Ray Charles. And tonight we leave you with a tribute to both men. Ray Charles performing America the Beautiful at President Reagan's second inaugural gala in 1985.